Hello, everyone, and welcome back to this episode of the Furtadio Experience. I am very thrilled to present to you my guest of the day, Matt Hogan, who his work consists of living well, thinking clearly, understanding love, and transforming pain. He's also a teacher, martial artist, and founder of Move Me Quotes. You're gonna get a kick out of this conversation, he's a great person to really help you inspire and go within. And that's what this podcast is all about. There's so many answers that you could go and Google, but so much of the work is to be done within. And no better guest than Matt Hogan. I'm excited to have you here. The first question I ask you and all my guests is who is Matt Hogan and what is your story?
Well, first off, I appreciate you having me on this podcast. I'm real excited to do this with you today. I love that you said that we're going to get a kick out of this interview, and I'm a martial artist, so well played there. But yeah, Matt Hogan. So I'll give you guys the abbreviated version of the story. I grew up in an environment where I was constantly outside playing football, basketball, and I was always wrestling, super engaged with a bunch of my friends. And then when I got to be about 10 or 11 years old, the neighborhood where I was so active in started getting violent. And there was some gang violence, and there were some things that happened that, kind of enticed my family to move just because, obviously we wanted to get out of that. So I moved when I was about 11 years old. And that was the first time in my life when I really bought my first gaming system. And so I started playing video games, and I started staying at home, and I started just kind of hanging out and not really having much to do because the new neighborhood I moved into wasn't really filled with kids playing outside all day. It was more of like a retirement vibe. So everyone was inside hanging out. So there wasn't really much to do. So I started playing video games, and lo and behold, I gained a bunch of weight, lost a lot of my self-confidence, didn't really have that challenge that I had when I grew up in that other neighborhood. And so I was in a little bit of a low point, and I was only 11 years old. So I didn't really have the mental clarity to understand what was happening. So nonetheless, about a year later, I found a martial arts school that opened up right around the corner from me. And the martial arts school was my opportunity to kind of challenge myself and, find something that would help me, explore, what that trouble I was having was and put a label on it and maybe help work through it. So went over to that martial arts school, walked in the door, and I was telling my mom how excited I was. And my mom was telling me how nervous she was. My mom thought I was going to walk into school and, the head instructor was going to like tell me I had to fight someone, or she had no idea what was going on. So it was completely the most warm and welcoming invitation to a martial arts school I ever could have had. I walked in the door, and I literally had instructors like clapping for me when I walked in. And I was like, oh, well, that's not what I was expecting. And took my first martial art class, and I was so excited to start that I actually remember the date I started. It was April 11th, 2001. And so I started on that day, and something inside of me just felt at home when I started doing martial art training at that school. And it was just, the rest kind of turned out to be history for me because, slowly but surely I started, getting higher ranks, doing better at tournaments, increasing the leadership and influence I had at the school. And then I started moving my influence out in the school to a position where I was starting to become an instructor. And then I moved up to become, an instructor for other instructors, and to where I am today, essentially, which is, I'm in a very fortunate position where I'm running that school that I took my first class in. And so, everything I've done from that point has really been geared towards improving my abilities as a martial art instructor, but also as a person. And writing is a deep part of that. My education that I went to school for is a deep part of that. And I feel very fortunate to be in the position I'm in. So that's kind of the abbreviated version of who I am, how I got to where I am. And I'm sure there's a lot of tangents we can dive into from there. But yeah, that's me.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that story. And I'm kind of getting the mental image of you just kind of feeling at home. And I think that's a really cool and powerful sentiment that they were like excited to have you here. And as I, selfishly, as I build out a community, I'm like, okay, maybe that's, you got to like clap, you got to really welcome people. People need to feel like they belong as a part of a community. And I know from following you and having a conversation with you, a lot of your growth and development has come from martial arts. I'm curious, what are some of the life lessons that you've learned from martial arts?
So yeah, the first one that comes to mind is, and I can tell you when I walked into the school that day, martial arts is grounded in, key components, like key life development skills. And so when I reached out to shake my instructor's hand for the first time, I kind of had that shy, kind of shy, chubby kid, reach out where I was kind of like, not really sure what was going on. And, immediately, as soon as my instructor kind of felt that in my hand, he grabbed my hand and he was like, and he kind of like made me grab sharp. He's like, no, he's like, back up, chin up, eyes straight ahead, grab firmly, look in the eyes. Like, this is how we're going to shake hands here. And this is what we're going to do here. So immediately it was like a quick shift, where I was like, oh my God, okay, I guess that's how I got to be here. And so not only was it welcoming and it was inclusive and the community was so warm, but there was such a sharp, contrast with being able to hold yourself at a high regard. And so that was one of the first lessons I got was hold yourself in a high regard, keep your back up, keep your chin up, look straight in the eyes. And when you do that consistently, that's one means through which you can develop your confidence. So building confidence is done not only through that. I mean, that was my first sharp lesson. And so holding yourself in a high regard, that was one of my first lessons that I still hold today to the best of my ability. But then one of the other really powerful elements of martial arts is the ranks, right? Rank progression, because what it does essentially is it takes what is starting out to be a long-term goal, like getting a black belt, right? That's the goal that most people have in their mind. And it does a beautiful job of just segmenting it so that there are smaller goals that add up to that bigger goal, right? And so my first goal was get, my white belt, and then they even broke down from there even further. So before I got my next belt, there were levels I had to get on my current belt that would qualify me for the belt test. And so not only was I building confidence right from the get-go, but I was also learning how to set the appropriate goals and learn how to achieve those goals that would result in something that's bigger than just the smaller goal I'm working towards right now. I know that this small goal is going to lead me to what ultimately is going to be something bigger. So that was another huge lesson that martial arts taught me, was how to properly set goals, how to properly work towards them, and how to continue make progress, because progress is the biggest motivator in life. And so how can I continue to find ways that I can build, to gain progress in my life, or build systems that I can fall back on that are going to give me the results I want. And that was another huge lesson right from the get, was, confidence, goal setting, community, and learning how to build community and build those connections, which was foundational. And, the last one I'll leave, I could go on and on, but the last one that really comes to the top of my mind is discipline. And in martial art classes, discipline is integrated holistically, in the sense that you have to make sure that you hold yourself in position until you're told you can relax. And you have to learn how to show respect and hold, the last move of a form until you're told that you can relax and, not move. It's very militant in that regard. And so when you are working those muscles from the age of like 11, 12, 13, those muscles build just like your biceps would. And so your discipline muscles build. And when you learn how to hold yourself, and you learn how to, not itch a scratch, and you learn how to not move when there's a sweat droplet rolling down the side of your eye and you really want to move and itch it, you learn how to hold yourself and prevent yourself from doing that. That same muscle applies when you're trying to hold yourself in a disciplined manner when you're looking at a friggin' donut or something. You want to have that ability to control yourself and to not give in to those small temptations that might lead you to an immediate satisfaction, like an itch or a scratch or something, because you know that there is a bigger vision at play, which ties back to that whole goal setting thing of becoming a black belt. And what does it mean to become a black belt? A black belt's a white belt that never gave up, a person who dedicated themselves to improving themselves over a long period of time, and who has made that steady, consistent growth, in a way that results in a black belt test in this regard. So yeah, that's a nutshell answer for you, but I could talk about that for hours probably.
Yeah, so kind of the discipline, all these different learning lessons, and I even see it as delayed gratification, because if you're in a certain move, like you can't move, you're not allowed to do that. But in today's society, we want to make moves so quickly. So I'm curious, as you have built out a writing habit, I'm curious how these habits that you've built from martial arts have transferred over to writing and kind of going within and learning more about yourself.
Absolutely. And, the foundational key for that was, it started with me interested in learning how to improve myself. So one of the situations I found myself in as a martial arts instructor, which is very unique in the sense that this is not something that happens in many careers, is I was young. I was like 14, 15, 16 years old, and I was a leader. I was a person who was teaching martial art classes to kids ages 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 years old. I was the one that was teaching them. And so I was the point of reference for a lot of parents. And so parents would come up to me and they would pull me in the office to the side and say, hey, Billy's having a hard time at home. They're not listening. What do you think I should do? So I had parents asking me for parenting advice when I was 16. I don't have a clue. Like, you know what I mean? Like I have, foundational components and keys that I learned through martial arts for myself. But, trying to teach a parent how to parent when I've never even thought about having kids was completely beyond me. So that was wild. And so I needed to start coming up with answers. So of course I had great role models who I talked to, and I had some, good instructors who I could ask for advice and maybe redirect any of the harder questions to. But I was asked about how to handle, like, from a tangible way, bullying, how to help kids improve their self-confidence, how to get them to listen at home, how to, do a better job in instilling characteristics for these kids. And I'm still like in high school, like, what high schooler is doing that kind of stuff? So what I started doing essentially was I started looking into personal development, self-improvement. And that was my introduction into that world. The first book that I remember reading was The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And that's classic, Stephen Covey. So I read that book, and after that I was hooked, and then I started diving into all the others at the time. And I started looking into getting into Tony Robbins. I started looking at, different ideas in like Don Miguel Ruiz, and starting to, branch out and look at different ways that, I could improve my martial arts understanding, and looking at different martial artists and what they've written. So what happened was I started getting all this information. And then as I was reading, I was like, man, some of this stuff is really good. I don't want to forget it. And so I started tweeting, right? This is back in 2010 when I started tweeting and putting some of the quotes out that I liked. And then I was like, but, I don't want them to just get lost on a timeline. So that's when I started Move Me Quotes. So Move Me Quotes started in 2010 in October. And I started just taking those quotes that I would share on Twitter, and I started just indexing them on a website. So I had I started a website. I just posted a quote. I would index it, organize it so that I could reference it again later when I wanted to. And that was the start of my curation journey. So I started curating the best insights that I could find. And I was so, I was so obsessed with doing that I, was doing it literally every day at the time. And because of the people I was reading, Tony Robbins, I was reading Seth Godin, I was reading Stephen Covey, I was so self-conscious to write anything myself that I never did. And that was also the seed of my imposter syndrome, right? Where I felt like, who am I to write anything in the self-improvement space when these guys are brilliant? When I'm surrounded by all these brilliant people, I'm reading all these brilliant words from them. Who am I to say anything in this space? So I didn't. And so it was strictly a curation site. And so fast forward a couple of years, and I was like, well, maybe I'll try to write something. So I was so nervous to put something out there into this community that would read my movie quotes, that I started a separate website. And I started a separate website that I called The Only Direction. It's not there anymore, but I had this website where I started blogging to, and I did it because I didn't want anyone to see it really. I just wanted it to be kind of hidden so I could kind of experiment and see if I really did have something to say. So I did that a little bit. I kind of experimented with that writing process, felt pretty good about it. And then I started going back to Movie Quotes and making lists. And I would put together a list of quotes. I would actually write an introduction, which is something I hadn't done for a couple of years. And I did that for a couple of years. Now, fast forward 10 years. It took me 10 years to get to this point where I finally, on January 1st, 2020, I decided as one of my New Year resolutions, I was going to start writing every day. And my goal was to just take a quote that, I thought I could elaborate on. And I would take one quote, I would write, a couple paragraphs on it, like in my own words, and then I would share it. And that was it. I called it Beyond the Quote. And so I did that, and I did it every day for 2020. And that was the start of my writing journey. And so it was, a couple things that helped me do that to get to that point. Number one, it was all of the discipline that I had put forth into developing myself. So the discipline from martial arts of doing what I say I'm going to do. There's an expression that we talk about in the school is your word is law. And so the idea behind that is when you say you're going to do something, it should be as sacred to you as a law that you abide by as a citizen in your territory, wherever you live, right? So when you say you're going to do something, you do it. And so that's why I'm always so careful about committing to things, because of that foundational principle we try to follow. If I say I'm going to do something, I do it. So I'm not, I do my absolute best. And that's why sometimes I'll take long pauses and I'll really think deeply about something before I say yes or no, because I know that if I commit to it, I'm going to do my best to follow through because my word is law. And so when I committed to that journey on January 1st, 2020, I took a quote, I wrote a couple paragraphs at the bottom. I didn't even announce that what I was doing. I just put at the bottom 1 out of 365. And then I just posted it. And I did it every day. I labeled it. I continued doing that. That was the discipline that I had built. It was all of the insight that I had gathered, which was, I guess, my continual drive for self-improvement, which again was developed in martial arts, because I know that one of the biggest motivators is progress. And so if I can find ways to continue making progress, then I'm going to be able to manifest that motivation. And so by looking into self-improvement world and reading those books and curating those insights, that's going to keep me excited about myself because I'm growing and the process continues. And so the discipline to keep writing, the motivation came from all of the insights that I was gathering, and being able to continuously do it was, a result of all of those years of overcoming that imposter syndrome and building up the confidence to actually do it. So I think those three tie in beautifully to that, but that's, the ideas in a nutshell.
Oh, that's really cool. And I think the discipline to stay on to something for 10 years, there's something to that, because it's not easy in social media world where in 3 months you feel like you should have 2,000 followers, 5,000 followers, X amount of likes, whatever it is. But you stayed true. And I know a lot of your word is law. I think that's actually a really great kind of motto to live by, because as I have a little bit of experience in the professional world, a lot of people don't. I feel like don't keep their word, or if someone says, "Hey, let's hang out," and I know they don't mean that, I'm like, "Why are you saying that?" kind of
Right.
thing. And I think that your word is law is even better than So a lot of people say just keep your word, but if it's law, like that's something you have to abide by. And
Right.
as your journey, I'm curious, how has your perspective shifted on what you view self-development and growth as from when you started to where you are now?
So when I first started, it was very self-oriented, right? And I was very interested in improving myself, which is essentially what self-improvement is and how most people categorize it. It was a selfish pursuit. It was just me trying to improve myself because I wanted to become better. And so when you start as a white belt, that's kind of the journey. You start at white belt. You want to learn these techniques, and you want to learn these mindsets, and you want to learn these self-defenses to the best of your ability so that you can perform them well, so you can pass your test, so you can get the next belt. So it's very self-oriented. Now, in our tradition, it takes about 4 years to get black belt. So once you get your black belt, it takes another 1 year after that to get a first degree black belt, which we would consider like a high school diploma, right? So your black belt's your high school diploma, kind of. You train for another year after that. That's kind of like your associate's degree. You train for another 2 years after that. You can test for a second degree black belt, which kind of is like our, bachelor's, you might consider. Another 3 years after that, and you can test for a third degree black belt. So then you would consider that like maybe like your master's degree, like in the college equivalency, or like a dual major. And then you have 4 years after that, which is when you would test for your fourth degree. Now, the reason I share this story is because once you get to fourth degree, which is the belt that I got in 2016, I got to my fourth degree black belt, which is considered a master's in Taekwondo. So the mindset shifts. And so no longer is the test about you obtaining techniques and self-defenses and insights for yourself, but then to go from fourth to fifth, it's about what you've given back to the other students. And so that's a very interesting thing that I think equates beautifully to self-improvement world, because while yes, it's true that you have to be selfish about your self-improvement, as you continue doing it, you realize it's not really just so that you can improve yourself. It's so that you can best help others. That was the big shift for me that happened after, a certain amount of time in training. I'm not sure exactly when the turning point was, but in like structured into our curriculum is that idea of once you get to fourth degree black belt, it's no longer about you, just doing things for yourself. It's about what you've given back to your students and how you've influenced them to become better. And in the self-improvement world, I think the same is true. I think you have to spend, several years obtaining information and insights so that you have enough to give back to others, because you can only give what you have. And so when it comes to self-improvement, the reason I'm so obsessed with it is not because I'm selfish. I do it because I know it's the only way I'm going to be able to best help other people, especially because I'm on the floor, I'm on the mats every single day working with these kids, answering parent questions, figuring out answers to questions that I've never faced myself. I'm chatting to people in the office who have been through really significant traumas that I've never been through. And I have to figure out things that I can say to them and things that I can help, coach them on or help them direct their energy one way or the other. So I would say that was the biggest shift for me. It really was exclusively just about me, which I think it has to be for everybody in the beginning, because you have to focus on yourself and you have to figure out the answers to your questions. You have to solve the problems that are, blocking you in your life. And then after you get to a certain point of that, just like it is for me in our school, it then starts to become almost like a U-turn. Now it's like, okay, now take all that you just got and start giving it back to others and figure out how you can do that. So that was the big shift for me. And I would say really helped me out a lot on my journey. And that's kind of where I'm at right now. Now it's not about just helping other people. My real focus right now is learning how I can lead other leaders and how I can help the leaders in my school give back and help the other people as well. So that's, an important mindset for where I am at this point in time.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely the domino effect. It's you have to, your organization, your martial arts, you're going to be training those leaders, and so you need to be on your top game to be basically giving back all the knowledge that you've kind of accumulated over the years to these other leaders, so that way they can pass that knowledge on as well and kind of continue to uplift the martial arts community and probably ripple effect out into their outside communities as well, families, school, wherever they find themselves kind of crossing paths with other people. I'm curious about, you talked a little bit about this going within and this self-development. I'm curious, in a world where at the beginning where I talked about where we can Google anything or we can look for answers, I think a lot of times we do have to find the answers within ourselves. And I'm curious what that journey looks like for you.
Sure. It's a great question. It's something I spend a lot of time writing about, thinking about. And one of the best things I ever did for myself to help me with that process of looking within and understanding what's going on within was daily writing. So when I started that daily writing in January 1st of 2020, I started out on a journey that allowed me to constantly check in with myself, answer questions that were unresolved in my head, and spend the appropriate amount of time putting thoughts to words, which is the process of clarifying thoughts, which is why I love writing so much, because writing is the act of clarifying thinking. And not enough people do that. They don't spend enough time doing it. You can do it in like meditation or just from like sitting, but the problem with it is when you don't write the words down, I think there's a power in writing the words down, because it allows you to essentially put them in a place where you can get them back. A lot of times when you do things just for the sake of thinking, it can get cyclical. It can get confusing. You might have a thought you don't want to forget, and so that takes up thinking space. And so now you don't have as much thinking space to devote to the other problems, and so it becomes a mess. So the act of writing it down allows you to put it in a space that you can get to it later if you want to reaccess it. And then it allows you to continue that train of thought in a way that would, go from one line. Okay, now what do I think about that? What do I think about that? What do I think about that? And it allows you to kind of rearrange things. And it's like, okay, well, actually, I think this should go here and that should go here. Oh, and this is actually how I feel about this person. It's not that I'm just pissed off. It's that I'm actually mad at myself, right? It has nothing to do with this person. It has to do with me. And so the daily writing was absolutely critical for me. And I don't know of any more powerful way that you can, look within rather than writing. And who talks about this? Pico Iyer. Have you ever heard of Pico Iyer? Okay, so Pico Iyer wrote a book, and he wrote a book that talked about traveling within. And the whole premise of the book was um, most people look at travel, right? And when they think about travel, they think about vacation, destination, they think about the real cool exotic resorts, and they think about all the cool places they want to go in their life. His whole book was about, well, rather than traveling to these exotic locations, why not travel to nowhere? And then everyone's like, what? Why would you want to travel nowhere? And then his whole argument is, well, because there's an entire world inside of you that hasn't been explored. And so his premise is, rather than, devoting all of your time and energy to trying to travel to all these external locations, spend the time to travel inside. And you can do that at any point in time. All you need is, you just need a little space. You need, maybe pen and paper if that's your vibe, or you get a little laptop if that's more along the suits of what you're interested in doing. And you spend the time to dig down deep and answer the questions that are unresolved in your head, so that you can find more clarity. And for me, the reason this process is so important is because I think that the answer to a lot of the inner turmoil that a lot of people face is to find the answers to the questions that are causing you that inner turmoil. So I think what causes you that inner conflict is simply because the conflicts haven't been resolved. Like if there's a bunch of fights going on, like if there's like a brawl, right? How do you break up a brawl? One fight at a time. You know what I mean? You get these guys to settle down, and then you go and you get these guys, and you figure out how you can get everyone separated and calm. And so I think writing is that process. Writing for me is that process of looking at the brawl that's going on in your head. And you're like, all right, listen, you two, come over here. Let's figure out what's going on with that. Let's settle that down. Okay, you two, let's separate these thoughts and figure out what exactly is, causing this anger, frustration, upsetness, sadness, whatever. Let's dissect that. And then it's every day and every day, because that is the process that's going to lead you to inner peace. Because what is inner peace but the absence of inner conflict? So that's kind of how I look at that, and how I look at, finding that calm in every day, just by one day at a time, answering those conflicts that are causing me the upsetness or whatever it might be. So that's one of the reasons I turned to writing, and why I feel, so passionately about it. The means through which I explore inside is, the process for me starts with Twitter, right? So what I do is, whenever I have a thought that's kind of like, prevalent at the time, or something I think might add value to others, that's when I tweet it. And then what I do is, when it's time to write, I have a space every day where I do about an hour of writing. Then what I do is I'll look at my past tweets, and I'm like, you know what? I could probably write a little bit more. This tweet isn't complete. I think there's more to it than that. So I take that, I copy paste it, and then that's my platform. That's what I jump off of for my writing. So that rather than looking at a blank screen, I use an idea to, jump off of for the rest of my thought. And I just kind of let a train go until I feel like something's complete. And once I feel like the idea is complete, maybe it's not like 100% done, but if it's like coherent, then that's when I kind of post it. And that's what my blog is. My blog is a 1 minute, 280 words or less post a day. And I do it every day. And I share it with people to help them, because what I'm sharing with them is something that has helped me. So that's how that process works. And that's how I go about the process of digging inside and looking within.
Yeah, no, and I love that, at the end of the day, it's kind of about giving back. It's giving back that knowledge that you've helped discover and go within. And so, for those that are listening and maybe have dabbled in writing a little bit, but haven't quite got to, the consistent daily writing, and they're kind of wondering, like, how should I write? Like, what should I write about? Do you have like advice or questions or thoughts on that?
Yeah. Okay. So the number one most important thing is drop all comparison. I think that's key, because that was what held me back for so long. What held me back for so long was I would post a quote from Tony Robbins. I'm like, damn, that's good. And then I would look at like something I would try to write, and I would be like, that's awful. Like, why would I share that? So for me, and this is actually a good segue back to martial arts and why everything's so integrated for me. So one of the beautiful things about martial arts is that it's individual based. It's progress oriented, meaning it's not a team sport. In team sports, one of the foundational goals is to win. And so obviously, when the goal is to win, then the means to achieve that goal is to fill your roster with the most talented players, right? Now, of course, there's other philosophies and strategies besides just talent. I mean, it's about more than just talent, but talent's a key component. And so the ones that aren't as talented at those sports initially, they're the ones that usually get benched, not in martial arts. Okay. So the thing about martial arts, and one of the reasons I love it so much, is because everybody gets equal time engaged with the class the whole time. And everybody's always working on all the different elements that are happening. And everything is just about the progress they've made from one rank to the next, because the curriculum that we teach, we want people to have their self-defenses done with confidence. We want them to have their kicks and punches memorized with good coordination. We want them to be able to do their forms with, good balance, posture, position. When they can do that, then they can test for a new belt, but it's about how they've done as an individual. And so that individual progress is the foundational key to why martial arts is so inclusive for so many people and why you start where you are. It's just about getting a little bit better every day. So going back to the writing thing, drop all comparisons, right? It's not about, this isn't a talent-based game. This is a community game. This is a game about learning how you can dissect what's happening within you and understand so that you can achieve more mental clarity. You can live a better, more, understanding life, and you can connect with people on a deeper level. And that's the means through which you do it. You drop comparison. Now, for me, it helped me to write daily when I had something to jump off of. So when you drop comparison, now it's just you versus who you were yesterday. Boom. You don't even have to share it publicly. You literally just got to get into the act and process of showing up. So staring at a blank page can be intimidating, right? A lot of people have a hard time overcoming the blank page syndrome. So what I usually do, what helped me was like I told you before, I either start with a quote that got me thinking. If a quote makes you nod, like, oh, or makes you kind of take a step back or pause, there's something there that's worth exploring. That's my opinion. So what I usually do is if I find myself pausing or thinking deeper about a quote, I usually take it. I usually use that to start, and then I just kind of write a little bit about what made me think or stop or how I feel about it. So that's one means. The other idea is, like I told you, the second way that I kind of do that is by doing the Twitter thing. So I take a tweet, I start with a tweet that I thought was inspiring or intriguing, and then I elaborate on it. I use it as a platform to jump off of, and then I kind of rearrange my thoughts as I see fit. Another way that you could do it is start with a question. And that's something that a lot of people will recommend when they're talking about writing like essays or anything. It's about answering questions, right? That's foundationally why we write. So what is the question that you're trying to answer? And so when you write the question out plainly, then usually the answer is going to be written in accordingly, and you can kind of accommodate that way. So drop all comparison, 100% is my first answer. Second, if you're having a hard time overcoming that, white page challenge, then start with like a quote, start with a tweet, start with a question, and then try to answer it. And then the last thing that I would say is, especially if you're just starting, write like you talk. And I think that that's something that Seth Godin talked about. I actually have a little, Seth Godin. I don't know if you can see it up there, but it says there's no such thing as writer's block. And so he writes about this a lot. And he just talks about how, people might feel like they have writer's block, like they can't think about what words to put on the page next, but people never get talker's block. And so if you just write like you talk and you just literally write it verbatim, then that'll help you overcome the initial stages of paralysis. And once you can overcome those initial stages, then you got the momentum on your side. And when momentum's on your side, you can just kind of just go with the flow, and then you can edit later. But editing should never be the first thought. The first thought should just be about regurgitation, just getting out, your thoughts onto paper in the easiest means necessary with no comparison, and then you take it from there.
That's a lot of wisdom right there. And for those that are just listening, if you need to pause and think about this and write this down, because I think sometimes that's where we go. We're like, oh, okay, I'll write that down later. And we just don't write it down. So pause the episode and write down some of those nuggets right there, because that's gold. And I think there's a lot of wisdom to that, because I know when I put, even if it's 3 lines on a paper and I'm have a couple ideas, it makes the writing process so much easier for me. And also when I do reflections, I do a longer reflection on Sundays, a little bit more about the week and where I'm at with life. It is a little more casual tone. It's a little more I'll throw a bro or a dude,
Right.
I'm not posting that to the internet. It doesn't matter. I can swear, right. I can do whatever I want. It's my space to write and get creative. And I actually have a similar thing where I feel like writing has really helped me get to know myself. I'm curious for you, what have you been writing about recently, and what quotes Actually, what have you been writing about recently? We'll talk about quotes next that has really been resonating with you.
Sure. So the four topics that I write about, like you mentioned in the beginning of the episode, I write about living well, I write about thinking clearly, understanding love, and transforming pain. And as of late, a lot of what I've been, thinking about is different ways that as a person that we can continue to, um, clarify our thoughts in a way that allows us to take actions that aren't that are without hesitation, right? And so a lot of times when we hesitate or we pause or we're not really sure what to do, it's simply because we haven't thought about it clear enough. So when you take the time, when you take a step back and you're able to look a little deeper into that, as far as like what it is that's causing those hiccups or those hesitations, and you do the writing so that you can overcome it. That's what's going to give you um, the less resistance to move forward into whatever it is that you're trying to achieve. So, even if I take a second here and I open up my blog, um, I'll show you a couple other things that I've been thinking about lately, or I'll mention it. I won't share the screen, but so the one I wrote about yesterday was a really interesting one. It was about the building blocks of your life. So last night I was thinking about how everyone's life is made up of time, energy, and attention, right? Those are the foundational building blocks of what is composed in a person's life. And, just like how it is with money, you can either choose to spend, save, or invest your time, energy, and attention. And when you spend your time, energy, attention, it's gone, right? Like when you watch a show on TV, there's no return of more time, energy, or attention. It's just used, it's gone. That's what it is. When you save your time, energy, attention, you increase what you had and you make it a little bit more, right? So that would be, and a good example of that would be as if you hired a professional to do a professional service, right? Because the time it took you to get the money to pay that professional would be less than the time it would take you to do the service yourself. And so by hiring someone to do it, you're saving resources, you're saving your time, your energy, and your attention for other things that you could be doing it for. And then the last one is about investing, right? So, as most people know with money, when you invest your money, you're trying to take $1 and you're trying to turn it into $2 essentially. And so when you invest your time, energy, and attention, it's about how you can multiply what little you had into much more than you started, right? So the idea with that one is if you learn a skill or you build up your knowledge in a certain way, then all of a sudden you have a new skill set or you have an understanding that allows you to solve a problem, not just once, but for the rest of your life. So rather than having to hire a professional to do a service for you one time, you no longer have to hire that person for the rest of your life because you have those skills yourself. And so the same thing is true with your thinking process. When you're able to solve problems in your head, not only do you save the thinking space for that day, but you save the thinking space from having to think about that problem for the rest of your life. And that is key. So a really good exercise that I kind of closed this piece with was write down each task of your day, label each task as being either a spending task, is this a saving task, or is this an investing task of my time, energy, and attention? And then you simply do the work of thinking about how you can convert more of those spending into savings, or how you can convert more of the savings into investing, and etc. So that was last night's piece. But again, I think that analogy is powerful because money is always at the tip of everyone's tongue. Everyone wants to talk about money, 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 right? But time, energy, and attention are also just as important to think about, right? Because those are really the building blocks of what your life is going to consist of. And so if you can learn to invest it so that you have more free time and you have more freedom to do the things that you actually want to do, and you don't have to sit there and do these things that are mundane or minimum wage jobs, then you have to figure out ways that you can solve higher level problems. And so by investing into yourself, you'll be able to free up that space to create more opportunity for you later. So that was last night's piece, for example, and these are all like I said on my blog. But yeah, so that was last night's train of thought.
No, and I think that's incredibly powerful because I don't think, there investing, I'm not an expert in investing, so I don't want to, be giving out advice in that terms, but I don't think there's anything more powerful than investing in yourself. And it can be hard sometimes to think about it in that way because with dollars, you're able to kind of like see something. So, but with investing in yourself, sometimes you don't see the results. It's not like that you're not in a spreadsheet on Excel that you can kind of see where your stock is, quote unquote. It's more of an internal feeling, but there's just nothing better than investing in yourself. And that's actually the point I'm at in my life right now is instead of like investing into a graduate school, I'm investing into my own community business, into my own personal development and well-being. And maybe my dollar amount isn't growing, but I'm investing so much into myself to be able to solve different problems along the way. I'm curious how you view investing into yourself and how what investing into yourself looks like.
Yeah. So it's a great question. And while you were talking, I was just thinking about the fish analogy, right? Where if you give a man a fish, you feed him for a day, you teach a man how to fish, you feed him for a lifetime. And so that's how I look at self investment, right? Because when you invest in yourself to learn how to fish and you learn how to go through that process of fishing well and learning all the different baits and all the different areas and all the different strategies, then you're going to feed yourself for a lifetime, which is what self-investment is. If you just you break your neck every day just trying to beg people for fish and to give it to you, and you're reliant on other people to give you fish, then you're always going to be in that position of need. And it's almost like a handicap. You're handicapping yourself from being able to get for yourself what would be required for your survival in this situation. So self-investment, what does it look like? It looks like anything that is adding value to your life. So anything that's getting you to think differently, anything that's going to get you to answer different questions or look at new problems. And it's anything, and there's a 101 different ways you can do it. Some of the basic ways, that you'll find me doing is every morning I start with curating. So I curate quotes every morning. And so that's one of the first things I do because I'm still in love with quotes just as much as I was 10 years ago. And so in the morning, I'll capture quotes from books that I'm reading. I'll post them to Move Me Quotes. You'll find me searching the web for like good picture quotes because there's a big audience for those. So I'll capture some picture quotes. And then I'll go in my email and I'll take a look at all of my different newsletters that I'm subscribed to. And I'll capture quotes from some of my favorite emails and I'll post those to websites. So in the morning, I curate, and those are like my tidbits. Those are my tidbits to start my day to kind of get to like kickstart my thinking. And that's one great way. That's one initial element for self-improvement. Investing in yourself is also spending time reading the books that I mentioned I was getting quotes from. So every night you'll catch me for about 20 minutes reading, 30 minutes I spend reading a different book. And, that's key. You got what we're doing right now. You got podcasts, you know what I mean? You take the time to sit down and one of the beautiful things about podcasts is obviously it's a passive way to collect information. And so you don't need to, like with a book, you can't do anything else except read the book. But with podcasts, you can sit there and put those on while you're doing most anything else during your day. So it's really powerful in that regard. It's a passive way of building up your mindset. And I know a lot of people are obsessed with those. And there's another, and it's funny because so one of my instructors, he actually mentioned to me the other day that he's gonna be mad at me. I'm not gonna say his name, but he's mad at me for saying this. He said that his eyes aren't good enough to actually read books anymore. So that's why he turns to pretty much only audio. So he's only audio based because his eyes literally just, they don't capture the words because he's older. So anyways, audio is huge. So it's about whatever works best for you. I mean, if you find ways to get the audiobooks in or podcasts, I love reading books. I mean, that's kind of a soft spot for me. You spend time curating other insights. You could get it through newsletters. I mean, there are so many great newsletters out there. I wish I had time to read all of them. There's so many people, even in our community. I know we spend a lot of time bouncing back and forth on Twitter, but a ton of people are putting out amazing content. And I mean, there's just so much good stuff. And I think that the biggest and most important thing, if I was going to categorize it, is you just have to make space for it. You got to give yourself the space for it, because if you don't block out the time for personal development, for self-improvement, for investing in yourself, then it's not going to happen, period. If you don't block the time out for it, it's not a priority. I did that tweet the other day. If you don't block out time for family, family's not a priority. If you don't have a blocked out time for exercise, exercise isn't a priority, right? And so the same thing is true here. If you don't have a blocked out time for investing in yourself, then it's not a priority. And if you aren't a priority, if your growth isn't a priority, well, then there's a lot of other things that aren't a priority that you think might be, you know? And so I think that's the biggest key, is just you have to be disciplined about your time blocks.
I couldn't agree more. And it is, and I've heard that before. If you don't put it on your calendar, or if you don't set out time for it, it's not going to happen. And it's about making space for it, because you just explained there's so many different ways to do it. It could be podcasting. Like for me now, I live in LA, it's in traffic. Like, but that provides me my extra 20 minutes of drive to work now is an opportunity to listen to a full conversation podcast at 1.5 times speed.
Right.
And maybe that's less reading time for me, but I have that audio time to really listen and take notes, and then therefore, write about it. Because I think also writing about what you're learning about, like reflecting upon it, or maybe you're an artist, maybe you're making little graphics, mind maps. I've seen people do different things on Twitter, however you learn, but like basically not regurgitating, but taking what you learn, adding your insights and experience to it, is going to be one of the best ways that you can learn and make that space and start to make connections of, okay, when I was in high school doing martial arts, I learned this, and like now I'm like 30, and this just like that connects, like just connecting those dots like feels so good. And maybe
Right.
that's part of the progress that you were talking about. And as we kind of wrap up this conversation, I'm curious, what is the most profound quote that is really stuck with you recently? And it's going to be probably really hard, so you can do a couple if that's
Yeah.
hard.
I'll actually tell you the one that's stuck with me the longest. So as of recent, I've been doing a ton of quotes from the Daily Stoic, which is Ryan Holiday's book.
Ryan Holiday. Yep.
Yeah, so I've been doing a lot of quotes from this one. This has been my the one that I've been diving a little bit deeper into, and he's got a ton of just great stuff in there. So I've been doing that as of recent. But the one quote that always comes to the top of my mind, that's been with me for the longest, like since I started this whole thing, is if you keep doing what you've been doing, you're going to keep getting what you've been getting. And I love that quote. It really resonates true in so many elements of life. And I think that that's one that I always fall back on when I find myself stuck. If I find myself stuck in any area in life, it's probably because I've been doing the same things the same way, and I need to change something up. And so, that's a Tony Robbins quote as far as I remember. And that's a quote that I embody, and I embody it to my full, to my full ability, so that I'm able to live my life in the most outside of comfort zone way. Now, you mentioned something before that I also wanted to comment on. You said that the idea of, when you hear it, you said there's something different about actually writing it down later. And I've written about that. The way I see it is when you listen, right? When you listen to audio of any kind, inspirational audio, it goes into your ears and into your brain. But when you take what you heard and you express it through the keyboard or through writing, what you're doing is you're moving it from the brain and you're moving it into and out of the body. And so I look at that process as embodying the knowledge, right? It's because you're taking it from your mind, these thoughts that you heard, or if you read it, and you're literally moving it, instead of it going from eyes to brain and staying there, or ears to brain and having it stay there, you're taking it from brain down the spinal cord, out through the shoulders, out through the arms, and you're embodying the knowledge. So it's a different process. It's a process of, making that information a part of you rather than it just being inside your brain. It's embodied within. And so that's why, like you said, that's so key. You're taking insight that you read or heard, and then you are finding ways that you can add your own element to it, which is what makes it yours. Because everything in life is a remix. There is nothing is, 100% true. There are very few things in life that are 100% truly original. 99.9% of things in life are just remixes or unique combinations of things that have already existed and, presented in a way that was, of enough value to justify its own space in the market. So anyway, so yeah, that's the quote that stuck with me. And that was what I wanted to mention about the idea of embodying information is absolutely critical.
Yeah, and I'll even build on that a little bit as I'm trying to provide a unique idea on it. Is like actions speak louder than words. If you're embodying the information that you're taking in instead of just talking about it, tweeting about it, you're actually practicing it in real life. That's another level because actions, of course, do speak louder than words.
Right.
And as we wrap up, I want to give you some space to tell the people your website, where they can find you on Twitter, and also any parting words you have for the audience.
I appreciate that. So I'm Matt Hogan 123 on pretty much most social media sites. So whatever social media site that you're on, just look up Matt Hogan 123, and if I'm on it, that's where you'll find me. And mostly I spend time on Twitter. That's where I spend 90% of my social media time. So definitely hit me up on Twitter first. I'd love to connect with people there. And then my website is matthogan.blog. That's it. That's the place where I do my daily writings, and that's the place where I would love to send some eyes to, because those daily writings are better when eyes touch them. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah,
So that's
sweet.
it.
Any parting words?
I appreciate the time. And Justin, this has been a lot of fun. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I appreciate it as well. Had a lot of fun. I learned a lot. Got to do some writing and reflecting on the insights.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, I look forward to seeing the results, and look forward to talking to you again soon.